And rounding out Phase 5, we have a series on Disney+. This is very special. It is going to be an 18-episode first season, 18 episodes. Daredevil Born Again.
Stop! He's already dead.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's your pal NOMZ here, and you all knew this was coming. From the moment hack fraud Feige baited the masses of MCU fanatical mental write-offs into thinking that the rocket ship he's helming, that once soared the skies and out of the goddamn stratosphere, that was built on the engineering and talent of his betters, just for the record, wasn't in fact nosediving itself into cratering spectacularly, if it hasn't already. And now that those far more talented individuals, as well as all those golden gooses that were carrying this guy's career, have all but long left at this point, this leech needs a new lifeline to keep his franchise from all but flatlining. And what is that lifeline for this creatively bankrupt, woke dickhead? With no assets remaining, where does this guy turn to? What's he gonna use? Or more accurately, what's he going to ruin? Why, none other than the hottest Marvel title currently going to this day, and not to mention the hottest Marvel title in the past 20 years, that fat-faced Kevin had all but nothing to do with, that he cancelled along with the rest of that property's spin-offs and side series, shipped over to Disney Plus, and is now repackaging and reselling it under the banner of Mickey fucking Mouse. Where all once legendary IPs, as it would seem, go to die at this point. And the latest on the chopping block of IPs for Kevin Feige and his team of shitbags to ruin is none other than Netflix's Daredevil series, which is going to be Disneyfied, watered down to shit, and repackaged and resold to us as Daredevil Born Again. One of the latest Disney Plus Marvel series that will be premiering on the platform and acting as a sequel to the Daredevil show on Netflix. Before I continue, let me just address a small little elephant in the room. But NOMZ, I thought you were done with the MCU going forward. Yes, absolutely. I said that and I stand by it, but firstly, Daredevil is a Netflix production, not by Marvel Studios. Yes, Marvel had some involvement in it, sure, but that was a different subsidiary group. And the lack of involvement by the Kevin Feige Marvel Studios regime is something I'll elaborate more on in this very video soon. And secondly, bear in mind the fact that Daredevil Born Again was announced after I denounced the MCU going forward. And in those videos, I did mention there would be very few exceptions regarding my commentary on future MCU projects. And considering the fact that even after the announcement of Phase 5 and 6, the only thing I find even remotely interesting besides Daredevil is Blade, the rest of the announcements were a laughingstock for the most part, and I have no intention of indulging any of them really. Feige basically emptied out his treasure chest of left-on-the-floor ideas, and I didn't even give the slightest fuck.
Yep, not even a wiggle down there.
But I do care about Daredevil, so when it comes to Daredevil Born Again, the Disney Plus series,
I'll do what's required.
The original Daredevil series on Netflix is one of the greatest live-action comic book adaptations to grace our television screens, and one of my personal favorite series of all time. Virtually everything about it was damn near 100% chef's kiss. The cinematography, orgasmic. It had fight scenes and choreography that would make Dragon Ball jealous, along with some of the most superb tracking shots I've ever seen. Comic book accuracy to the man without fear, pretty goddamn faithful, with a few tweaks here and there. And a borderline perfect cast with some of the most stellar acting you are likely to see, as well as an outstanding story for the majority of the show's runtime. Hell, in the hands of Drew Goddard and his team, Charlie Cox's Daredevil even managed to, sort of, save the Defenders from becoming a complete steaming pile of shit, courtesy of Lauren the See You Next Tuesday Hissrich, Netflix's very own Kathleen fucking Kennedy. But what was most astounding, in the best possible way, about the Netflix Daredevil series, and I'm sure for many, including myself, the biggest breath of fresh air about it was its level of maturity. For a series under the banner of current year Marvel, the Netflix Daredevil series stood as a diamond in the rough for gritty realism in the superhero genre, something we'd only scarcely seen since the MCU began. But after Disney, Marvel Studios, and Kevin Feige ordered for the show to be cancelled, well, it appears those glory days are all but gone. Because this once great diamond in the rough is about to get tossed into one huge steaming pile of shit, helmed by a bunch of clueless hacks that haven't the faintest clue of how to utilize the IP correctly. And it's only a matter of time before the MCU once again ruins yet another beloved character with their cookie-cutter bullshit. So let's go through not if, but when, why, and how the MCU will ruin the assets that it poached from the Netflix Daredevil series. Firstly, some of you might already be reading in the comments that Daredevil was always meant to transition to the MCU and it was always heading this way. It's Kevin Feige's master plan, hashtag trust in Feige. Netflix Daredevil was always MCU anyway, and the MCU is gonna save Daredevil.
You really believe that?
I don't know. No. Maybe.
Is she retarded?
Let's be perfectly honest here. Daredevil was never really MCU, now was it? Like, sure, canonically, it acts like it follows the events of Joss Whedon's Avengers movie. Even a few visual Easter eggs like the article saying Battle of New York in big white letters, not to mention the terror in Harlem referring to Hulk versus Abomination that took place in a movie so old that it had nothing to do with Disney, which is saying something. And yes, it's due to the destruction the Battle of New York left in its wake that allows Wilson Fisk to gain a foothold in Hell's Kitchen.
The last 2 years have transformed the business.
Yeah, the world watched half of New York get destroyed. That's a lot of sympathy.
And Union Ally benefited from every dollar of it.
But canonically, Daredevil Season 1 takes place 2 or at most 3 years after the events of the first Avengers, and New York is absolutely fine. Like, I don't imagine it would look like death, though I'd expect it would take a lot more than 3 years to properly rebuild it, and yet every shot of the New York skyline is utterly fucking immaculate. Fact of the matter is, you could remove every reference to the Battle of New York, and therefore the MCU as a whole, and virtually nothing would change. Hell, Daredevil Seasons 1, 2, and 3, and even the Defenders become a zillion times better if you just imagine a catastrophic earthquake took place instead of the Battle of New York.
This office was barely touched by the incident, which is why it's on the market already.
The incident, is that what we're calling it now?
Well, it sounds so much better than death and destruction raining from the sky, nearly wiping Hell's Kitchen off the map.
Shorter, too.
Says he was framed.
Yeah, I could say I'm Captain America, but it doesn't put wings on my head.
The hell you get all this crap?
Internet.
Bunch of long underwear types. Stitch these together yourselves.
I mean, if he had an iron suit or a magic hammer, maybe that would explain why you keep getting your asses handed to you.
We're done here.
Sure, Daredevil wasn't the only Netflix show to reference the MCU. You can find some more direct references in Jessica Jones and Luke Cage.
You were heroes.
Not me.
The city was saved. I was trying to pull my mother out from the rubble, while all around me, you people were raining down hell.
So go after the big green guy at the flag waver. I wasn't even there.
Hey, yo, my man. All HD, got it right here on Blu-ray too. Tony Stark, the big blonde dude with the hammer, the old dude with the shield, the green monster, and...
But more to the point that Marvel Studios shot themselves in the foot by trying to keep the Netflix series tied in with their family-friendly cinematic garbage. Did they just forget that the actor they cast in the upcoming disappointment of Blade is the same actor that played Cottonmouth in Luke Cage?
Are you serious? Based on a prototype by Hammer.
I'm gonna bust his bunker with the ex-wife. With the what? Hammer tech? Yeah.
What kind of metal does that?
Nothing from this earth.
The incident.
I'm sure that perfectly falls in line with Blade's origin story. Oh wait, let me guess, Feige's just gonna drag this chump straight out of the multiverse, I'll bet. Or is this like Spider-Man No Way Home, where the MCU is gonna poach assets from other creators, as if they're canon, but only selectively choose to showcase what's canon based on popularity? Like when they referenced Raimi's Venom, but showcased Tom Hardy instead. Well, of course, that was after they baited him in the movie, and then stuck like 5 seconds of him in the end credit scene just so they could lazily make the symbiote MCU canon because fan service and because they couldn't bother to write it themselves. Kevin Feige's master plan, everybody. But let's get back to Daredevil and the Netflix continuity. My point is this weird contractual or whatever the fuck obligation of Netflix to reference the MCU only ever hurt the Netflix Marvel products, and hell, even hurts the MCU as well. Because without that link, these problems don't arise and these questions don't have to be answered. I'd like to show you this little clip from Daredevil Season 3 to show you what I mean by this.
What if you stop this fight, took time to heal, and let other people like you go after Fisk?
This isn't their fight. Fisk is my problem.
The reason this makes sense and doesn't hurt the continuity in the Netflix series is because Matt Murdock wasn't referencing the Avengers, he was referencing the Defenders, which, remember, Daredevil Season 3 was a direct sequel to. Bottom line, those references to the MCU were contractually obligated, most likely, but practically meaningless because Daredevil was never trying to be MCU. In fact, it was going out of its way to pretend the MCU didn't exist because the creators knew as soon as they start tying their work into Kevin Feige's shit show, it was going to open up a million other fucking questions of, hey, where the fuck is everybody? Especially when Wilson Fisk frames Daredevil for committing a terrorist attack that leveled a large chunk of Hell's Kitchen. You're telling me that's not an Avengers level threat? An Iron Man level threat? Or what about your friendly neighborhood Iron Boy Jr. level threat? Granted, in the case of Spider-Man, I offer more leeway due to the licensing issues with Sony, but point stands, if Daredevil is MCU, that raises every single one of these questions, plus a billion fucking more. But don't go blaming Daredevil for not wanting to be part of the MCU, because if anything, the Daredevil showrunners were only retaliating because it was fuckwit Feige who went out of his way to snub them and the rest of the Marvel Netflix shows in the first place, due to them not fitting the fuckwit Feige Disneyfied, watered-down, steaming pile of the family-friendly and painfully unfunny, shitty fucking mold of the mainline MCU, especially in its later years. Well, until Feige and Disney finally blew their load with Avengers Endgame, exhausted all their assets, and realized, oh shit, we need some star power and hype fast. And since we're too creatively bankrupt to create our own, they did what they do best and, by any means necessary, lawyered the fuck up along with their fucking checkbook and poached the shit out of assets made by other creators, and all of a sudden, Charlie Cox was getting a call from Kevin Feige himself. Hey, Charlie boy, there's my superstar. How you been? It's been way too long. Kevin, you snubbed me for 4 years, mate. Hey, love you too, buddy. Guess what? You're ready for the big time, kid. That's right, Daredevil's coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're coming along for the ride too. What do you say? Kevin, we've been part of your sinking ship this whole time. You just haven't cared to acknowledge us. Which was great because it allowed us to make a fantastic fucking show without having to deal with any of your bullshit. And we were doing just fine until you fuckers made Netflix axe the show while it was at its peak. That's the spirit. Awesome, sweetheart. We're sending you the contract now. I made sure to add some extra zeros just because we're best buds. Eh, Charlie boy? Whatever, if I can play Daredevil again, I'll do it. Excellent, we'll be in touch. Or at least that's in my mind what I can imagine happened between those two. But just for the record, I don't blame Charlie Cox or Vincent D'Onofrio for that matter for playing ball with Disney. They're businessmen after all, professionals, and they love their characters. And I'm sure they were the most gutted of all when Netflix cancelled the original show in order to cuck to Disney. I made a little rant on that as well if you wouldn't mind checking it out. It's just unfortunate for them that it's not going to be the return to glory they probably imagined it would be. And that finally brings us to the meat of this video, Daredevil Born Again.
And rounding out Phase 5, we have a series on Disney+. This is very special. It is going to be an 18-episode first season, 18 episodes. Daredevil Born Again.
Complicated issues that matter. They take too much focus. They take too much time away from texting and 1,000 channels on the satellite dish.
And starring in that show are two people I hope you've heard of, Mr. Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio.
At the end of the 2022 Marvel Comic-Con press conference and the unveiling of Marvel's Phase 5, Kevin Feige announced the return of Daredevil, specifically citing the inclusion of beloved actors Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio reprising their roles, and that the show would be 18 episodes long for its first season and would close out the MCU Phase 5 for Disney+. And it would be titled Daredevil Born Again. Okay, let's tear this to shreds. First of all, Kevin Feige saved the best for last because he recognizes that Daredevil was the one thing that fans were actually clamoring for more than anything. But in addition to that, he recognizes it's the only currently active episodic or cinematic IP that Marvel owns that still has a fucking pulse. Sure, people are curious about the Fantastic Four and X-Men, but what fuckhead Feige is going to do with them is yet to be seen. Though based on the reactions to the Multiverse of Madness and the rest of Phase 4, it can't be anything good, which is why, at best, fans are simply cautiously optimistic and not elated with excitement because the track record is becoming increasingly worse the longer Feige's train wreck continues. Nevertheless, once Daredevil Born Again was announced, the crowd fucking roared with excitement and went absolutely nuts because yes, it was coming back. Our prayers have been answered. Hashtag Daredevil saved.
No!
To all those celebrating the announcement for the new Daredevil series, never forget it was Kevin fucking Feige who had a major hand in cancelling the original show in the fucking first place. He's responsible for it. Cancelling by far the greatest Marvel show to ever exist, so it would be brought over to the Disney platform, to his shitty scrap fest of a franchise that remains, so he could water it down and molest the fucking shit out of it. Don't praise that shithead for bringing it back because he's the reason it's fucking gone. Well, him and the fact that Netflix didn't have a spine to hang on to the licensing, and that they're run by a committee of out-of-touch, warped fuckers who have their priorities completely fucked all the way up. Seriously, Netflix, I don't understand how this works. You go from the best comic, manga, or graphic novel live adaptation in history to some of the fucking worst. Just be glad Fox already placed the title of worst of all time perpetually out of your reach since Dragon Ball Evolution exists. And that brings me to the title of the upcoming Daredevil Disneyfied fanfiction sequel to the Netflix original series, Born Again, you say? Wow, Disney, could you be any more on the nose? See, I found this incredibly insulting as a fan on two levels. Firstly, being the meta reason, Born Again, given that Disney and Marvel are run by such narcissists at this point. It's no wonder they choose a title insinuating that Daredevil is going to be revived and done right by Disney and the Feige regime, as if they didn't actively try to ignore it at every turn, and even had it cancelled once it actually had a thriving fan base, while on the other hand the MCU was slowly starting to die and needed to poach the Netflix assets to keep their sinking ship afloat. To put it plainly, they're advertising Daredevil Born Again like it's some kind of revival with the best intentions in mind, when it's actually going to be a fucking burial. And the second reason the title is insulting is because Born Again is a reference to the Daredevil comic run titled Daredevil Born Again by Frank Miller, and this storyline, along with several others, was already adapted into Daredevil Season 3, widely considered by many, including myself, to be the peak of the entire series, and is also its final entry in the Netflix run. Now, people are likely going to point out, well, it's just a title, why are you getting so bent out of shape, NOMZ? It's just a harmless reference to the comics. Oh boy, I guess you guys have had your head in the sand these past few years. If history is anything to go by, this reeks of them promising a new story and sequel to what came before. But based on this title, all they're going to really do is retell a watered-down version of the same story. During the reveal, remember, Feige made sure to let everybody know ahead of time that the two fan-favorite actors, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, would be reprising their roles, so the hype train would get rolling. So now what I'm expecting is essentially Daredevil's version of The Force Awakens. The promise of something new and exciting, with the original cast returning only to give us an insulting, disgraceful, shameful retread of what came before. And considering the title Born Again, I'm certain it's going to be another Daredevil versus Kingpin story all the fuck over again for a third fucking time without actually moving anything forward. And it's going to be roughly the same storyline from Daredevil Season 3, more or less, which, by the way, I might add, tying Daredevil back into the mainline MCU already made completely fucking pointless, because thanks to Hawkeye, Kingpin is once again out of prison, and all of Matt Murdock's efforts, not to mention Agent Nadim's sacrifice, was completely fucking in vain. And that, as a fan of the original series, is already enough to make me furious. In addition to the announcement, Kevin Feige tried to boost hype by saying the series would be 18 episodes long, which is roughly 3 times longer than your average Marvel series, that most consider to be bloated with nonsense already. And it's also substantially longer than the seasons for the original Daredevil series, that Netflix greenlit for having 13 episodes each, with each episode having a clear and present purpose. Based on the MCU's track record with episodic productions, for its Marvel projects, You really expect them to fare any better with 18 episodes instead of 6? Because I highly doubt it. Here's the only reason why Daredevil Born Again is going to be 18 episodes long, and it has nothing to do with the story. It has everything to do with dragging out Disney Plus subscriptions as long as possible, because unlike Netflix and certain other streaming platforms, Disney is as anti-consumer as possible and hinges on stretching out their series with as much bait as possible to keep their viewers hoping for their time's worth as they have to wait for the next episode week after week. One of the reasons I'm so glad Cobra Kai is still on Netflix, so I can binge watch that series in its entirety the day it releases. But back on point, since Feige and Disney and Marvel know that Daredevil is going to be the most popular Marvel series by far to hit the Disney Plus platform, it makes sense that Marvel Studios would bait the hook for as long as possible. And with that said, the other reasons Feige chose to place Daredevil Born Again at the end of MCU Phase 5 is also so Disney and their shill media can shout from the fucking mountaintops how Marvel Cinematic Universe is still going strong 15 years after its inception. Mastermind creator Kevin Feige ends Phase 5 with record-breaking numbers. Disney Plus subscribers are at an all-time high. That will likely be gone the second episode 18 of Daredevil finishes airing. Though I'm sure all the mainstream rats shilling for Disney out there will be sure to leave that last part out. But point stands, none of the reasons surrounding Daredevil Born Again, its title, its length, its cast, or virtually anything about it were chosen with the show's best interest in mind. And certainly not the fans. No matter how it appears to seem with the fan-favorite cast returning, it's all corporately designed to manipulate its target audience and make money, not telling unique and logical stories that would act as a faithful sequel to Daredevil Season 3. And yes, I'll go out on a limb and say the story is going to be derivative as fuck, bloated as balls, littered with woke bullshit, cough, Karen Page, cough, and likely a large emphasis on characters we Daredevil fans really had no interest in seeing in a fucking Daredevil series, along with numerous fan service cameos or cameo bait, Spider-Man, designed to do nothing but fan the cancerous fires of theory cultists shilling their shitty fucking show. The same ones that are desperately trying to keep the MCU on life support. And before some point out the irony of me once again calling out theory cultists whilst presenting what you might call a theory of my own as well, quite frankly, I don't see it that way. History is my guide, and if history is anything to go by, this is not a theory nor a prediction, it is a spoiler. On top of that, I'm simply venting my frustrations as a fan of the Netflix Daredevil series, and I'm seriously going to hate knowing its name will be getting dragged through the mud. So yeah, don't praise Disney, Marvel, or fuckwit Feige for bringing Daredevil back. They weren't the ones to make it great, and they were most definitely the ones that prevented us from getting an actual Daredevil Season 4. And they were so eager to start baiting people with yet another poached asset that was made by other creators that fans adored, that they couldn't even wait till Daredevil Born Again to start using these beloved characters and the actors reprising their roles. Now, fair play Charlie Cox's cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home, a film that survives solely on fan service and poached assets from other creators, might I add. Despite that, the Charlie Cox Matt Murdock cameo was one of the few things I genuinely enjoyed about that movie, and it actually felt like an homage of sorts to the Spider-Man animated series in some ways when Peter Parker meets Matt Murdock under similar circumstances. Wilson Fisk, on the other hand, was shoehorned out of prison where he should have been left after Daredevil Season 3 and turned into a complete laughing stock, paling in comparison to the Kingpin from the original Daredevil series. And now fuckwit Feige is shoving Daredevil onto the Dead on Arrival series She-Hulk in the hopes of baiting a couple thousand more viewers per episode. Fucking She-Hulk? A series so abysmal it's currently being memed and maligned by everybody because of how terrible it is? And this is the series that you want Daredevil to debut his new costume in? If I were to give him some leeway, Matt Murdock once again making a cameo, I can kind of understand since Matt's a lawyer and She-Hulk's a lawyer, so it makes sense that those two would cross paths at some point. But you want to blow Daredevil's load and ruin the shit out of him before you even get to his burial series in 2024? But I mean, how bad could it be, right? Maybe I'm jumping the gun, right? Maybe Daredevil will be the same hardcore, ass-kicking, and all-encompassing serious, charming, and mature character he's always been, right?
No!
Now, the She-Hulk writer has recently been chastised for being completely inept when it comes to adapting the She-Hulk source material, which both its show and its source material I have no interest in, and wouldn't be caught dead watching that shit. But the writer in question also went on to say She-Hulk looks to explore the lighter side of Daredevil, because apparently that's what Daredevil fans have been salivating to see after Disney had Netflix cancel season 4. Dear God, these out-of-touch dumbtards. Like, we haven't even gotten to the Born Again series yet, and they already want to groom Daredevil into being yet another terrible, quippy douchebag like the rest of their indistinguishable cast at this point, of terribly unfunny and unlikable characters. All the red flags are there, and you don't gotta be a prophet to know they are about to ruin the absolute shit out of Daredevil. You just have had to have consciousness. Now, I have seen this argument of desperate Daredevil and Marvel stans whining at the criticism levied towards the MCU and what they plan to do with Daredevil. Paraphrasing here, Marvel haters saying Daredevil being lighthearted would ruin the character. Obviously, they haven't read the comics, duh. And the irony behind this is that they go on to show this terrible comic book panel as if that justifies their stance on the matter and is actually some kind of retort that people are supposed to take seriously. Now, admittedly, even though I love the Daredevil series to death, I'm still a relative newbie when it comes to the comics. As of yet, I've only read Frank Miller's Man Without Fear and Born Again comics, and I plan to read Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil next. However, from what I've gathered, there's one Daredevil comic run that I've been told to stay the hell away from, and most all Daredevil fans apparently despise. That being the comic book run by Mark Waid. And which Daredevil comic run was the comic panel in question taken from, oh I wonder? Oh yeah, it was the Mark Waid fucking Daredevil comic run. This is your argument for why it's okay for Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige to butt-fuck Daredevil's character to pieces by turning him into a light-hearted, quippy, and likely very emasculated douchebag? Go fuck yourself. And here's something else I want to address, is when Marvel stans use the "durr, these haters getting mad but it's in the comics, durr," is the same stupid excuse made for Mighty Thor and Thor Love and Thunder, which, by the way, I was right about for flopping big time at the box office, or at least flopping by the LOL billion-dollar Marvel standard. You citing a terrible comic as a reference point for why it's okay for Marvel to destroy characters, for whatever reason, is not an argument that's even worth the tiniest fuck. Because it's fucking stupid to begin with. If anything, that speaks wonders about how little you know about the comics or the characters in general, because the people who have actually read and understood those shitty comics would know not to adapt them. Exploring the lighter side of Daredevil is quite possibly the stupidest thing Marvel could do, because it's the opposite of what Charlie Cox's portrayal of the fucking character was based on. But now that Disney and Feige have their shit-stained claws in the character, they say, let's not adapt the version that actually worked, let's adapt the version that's universally maligned. Now, whether that's once again to fit the terrible, cookie-cutter, family-friendly, and fucking moronic MCU corporate mold, or just pure narcissism by Kevin Feige to ruin the character because he's butthurt another studio and creative team made something way better than anything he's even been remotely involved in pertaining to the MCU, but still wanting to exploit the character, of course, that fan-favorite character to push his shitty woke agenda-driven bullshit and to boost numbers, so that all the stans could misplace their gratitude once again and tout what a genius Kevin Feige is. More like there was a shift change at the helm and now he's sailing the ship straight into an iceberg. It's no coincidence that things have gotten exponentially worse after the death of Stan Lee, and not to mention the departure of Joss Whedon and Jon Favreau from MCU creative teams. Bottom line, the MCU, its executives, and its creative teams are not going to save Daredevil. They were the ones who killed it. The second it was cancelled unceremoniously and taken off Netflix, we all knew what was going to happen, and now all we can do is look on in horror. Don't expect the breathtaking cinematography, character depth, story quality, and maturity level of themes, blood, and violence that we all adored from the hard-hitting reality of the Daredevil original series. The MCU will ruin Daredevil, it's just a matter of time now. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed this little rant, and let me know what you think in the comments below while I do some good old-fashioned channel plugging. First of all, just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to all my Patreon supporters and YouTube members for all of their contributions to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, I've left a link in the description, or if you'd like to become a YouTube member, you can just hit the join button below. Also, you can check out the channel's Discord server. What Discord basically is an online community where followers of this channel can go to congregate and talk about a range of different topics, ranging from Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, video games, comics, or pop culture in general. Check it out at your leisure, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. Also, if you're looking for more Marvel-related content on this channel, rest assured you won't have to look very far. Here is just a select few videos I've made that you may enjoy, if you'd like to check them out. Also, I want to give a special thank you and shout out to A British Potato for helping me out with the audio editing for this video. I've left the link to his channel below, check him out, he makes great stuff. And finally, here's one last thank you for staying till the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time. Hey, Charlie boy! It's your best bud here, Kevin Feige. How are you, sweetheart? Listen, I know Daredevil Born Again Season 1 didn't quite go our way, but what do you say? Gonna put you down for Season 2?
Go to hell.